Happy Wednesday, friend. It is so good to see you. I really missed you, but I'm excited to dive in this week with something a little bit different. So, normally we come on here, we get our caffeine filled glasses or our non caffeinated drinks, and we slide in for a cozy coffee side chat with an interesting leader. And we are going to do that today with a little bit of a remix, a little bit of a spin, because as you know, about once a month, I do solo workshops. And what we found is that these solo workshops are an amazing hit with people. So people really enjoy this idea of being able to come to these like mini workshops, pack a powerful punch, get in and get out. And so we thought, I wonder if there's a way that we can combine these coffee talks with these mini workshops. So right now you are joining, whether you know it or not, for our inaugural sort of joint coffee mini workshop. So I'm very curious at the end of this to hear what you think. You could always let us know in the chat what you're thinking about, or what is something that you really grabbed onto, or maybe something that you're like, man, I want to just get a little bit more of this. So if you haven't already, we're a really fun bunch here. Say hi in the chat. Let us know where you're coming in from, what's in your cup. I wanted to say a big hi to Jeff and Giacomo and Rachel and Andrew. We have people coming in from London, from Connecticut, from Virginia, North Carolina, a little bit of all over the world. So if you haven't already, please do say hi in the chat so we can get a little bit more familiar with each other. So hopefully you've done your Google stalking for today. You know that we are focusing and really honing in on communications, how we can get better at them, how we can improve them in our own business and workplace. And so when I thought about communications, I thought of no one better than our guest Brenda today, because you might be familiar with her because over 3 million people have seen her LinkedIn learning courses all about communications, especially her top 10 most watched one, which is just unbelievable, which is called Communications Foundations, where over 850,000 people have tuned in to learn communication strategies from her. She's a senior lecturer at the Kelley School of Business, and all day, every day, she coaches teams in building trust and credibility, design thinking, and customer service. So I thought today's workshop, we can really focus in on some of these questions that Brenda gets asked most often. And actually, I get asked most often too. So it's a little bit of a joint deal. So we are going to welcome Brenda, get her in here, say hello, and then we are going to kick off this mini workshop. So thanks so much for being here, Brenda.
Cheers.
Good to see you.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here. I'm following the comments coming in. What a wonderful group you have.
We have an all-star group, and we're excited to lean in and learn from you today. And I just kind of wanted to kick it off by saying, I think some people joining might be thinking, well, gosh, Brenda, communications can mean a lot of different things. So I'm curious for you, who specializes in this work all day, every day, how do you define communications?
So communication is this sort of interactive piece. It's a mutual interaction. It's not one way, it's two ways. It's the way ideas get out of our brains and birthed into the world, into others' spheres of perception or influence. And it is a very contextual sort of thing. So I can say certain words in a certain tone in one context, but you move those same words and tone to another context and it may have an incredibly different meaning. So those are sorts of some of the ways I define communication.
Well, it's definitely a big subject, and I know communications is something that we are all sort of constantly improving on. There is no getting there. We're never done with the work. It's sort of like a continual hamster wheel that we can never get off. So I'm excited to have this sort of tune up today, and I'm really excited that you kind of brought 3 of like your kind of hairiest things that you dig in with clients. The first one being which I totally relate to, which is making big asks at work. And so I'm curious for you, as somebody who, again, deals with this day in and day out, what is it about big asks that just really trips people up time and time again?
Well, beyond how to articulate big asks very clearly so that we don't sound like we're saying something else, because that was a real challenge when filming that particular video. We probably had more retakes of that than any other thing I've ever filmed, because they'd say, "Oh, you were just a little light on that K there sound. Brenda, try again." We want to be clear, this is not a health and fitness kind of moment. We are talking about requests that you might make that feel big to you. It's such an interesting topic because, well, first of all, some of the gender research by people like Linda Babcock is so fascinating around the fact that women do not make as many requests at work as men do. And that creates this whole sort of weird inequity that people need to think about. And why is that? And there's sort of a double-edged sword. So I think it's fascinating from a research perspective on just why are people asking, or why are we not asking? What are the experiences different people have when they do make a request at work? But universally, regardless of your ethnicity, your gender, where you're from, what your background is, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, I think you're right, Kim. We all are just a little intimidated when it's time to ask for that promotion, ask for that big project, ask for a resource, and send me to training that's going to cost X thousands of dollars. Those are just, we lose sleep over those, don't we?
I definitely do. And I know when I was looking over kind of our notes on this workshop today, and I saw this first one under, how to make a big ask, I literally cringed, Brenda, because it is the exact opposite. I'm like an avoidant person. I'm a Libra. Not that we're going to get into astrology here, but like, I just love, like, everyone wants to get along. I just want everyone to be happy. I'm a little bit of a people pleaser. So when I first saw that you were saying, in order to make a big ask, we have to be direct, I was like, oh no, Brenda, I hate being direct.
No.
I hate being direct. It's like my worst nightmare. So I'm curious, like, how can we be direct? Or for people like me, where being direct is really just kind of intimidating.
Oh yeah. Well, step it back. So before you get to that moment where you're making that direct ask, there's some homework to be done. And that homework comes in the form of, do your research so that you know the ask you're making is not an unreasonable ask. Because if tucked away in my mind, I'm thinking, "Ooh, I'm not sure my skills really are worth X number of dollars that I'm asking," or "I'm not sure that I should," if there's any doubt, it's going to make that ask that much more challenging. So do your homework, and then think of making a request like a big sporting event, right? So you got to condition for your sporting event. You're not just going to go out and run a marathon or make a direct ask if that's intimidating. You're going to work up to it. So I think some of the ways we exercise that muscle to get prepared for the day of a big request are things like talking with friends about the ask, running your language by people to get some feedback, to just practice getting those words out of your mouth instead of just mulling over in your head. I think that one of our favorite activities, colleague Tatiana Kolovu and I do, is we actually make it sort of a game or a challenge of who's going to make the most audacious ask this month. And then when we do our monthly check-ins, it's like, well, what did you ask for this month? Well, here's what I asked for. And so it pushes us to practice a little. I remember a time when she got lost trying to find something and had stopped to ask for directions a couple of times. Asking for directions does not win the game. You got to be more audacious than that. But she ended up just saying to this guy on a motorcycle, "Hey, can I pay you $20 to just get in front of me and just direct me?" Because the asking wasn't helping. She wasn't getting where she needed to go. She won hands down that month. Wasn't that a great ask?
That's a bold ask.
I would never even thought of it. But then, the more of these times that she and I play the game, It helps build that muscle. Another thing we suggest is just asking for one thing, at least small, big, silly, crazy, meaningful, not meaningful, for 30 straight days. Again, it's conditioning. And make sure that some of those requests, as you're prepping for the big direct ask, are ones where you know you will get told no. Because that's another reason I think we hesitate to ask, is we're so afraid of no. And once you've been told no a couple of times, it's like, oh, I survived that. It was no big deal. So Kim, I went to a gas station attendant and I said, will you give me a discount on my gas? Of course, they're not. The poor little guy working at the gas station does not have the authority to discount my gas. I knew he didn't. But that way, somebody told me no. I felt the embarrassment. I blushed. I walked out. I lived. So then the next ask, which maybe had some more meaning to me and might have resulted in a no, I could at least get the words out.
You could at least kind of practice that muscle of asking even for small things. And I love this point that Kimberly brings up as well, which is, you know, I think sometimes people think asks have to have like some sort of monetary or physical form, like, you know, give me that donut, it's the last one in the box type of thing, or, you know, give me that raise and, you know, pay me $10,000 more. And I like the fact that Kimberly really touches on service commitments too, because when you're talking about those small asks, it could be something as simple as, can you take out the trash? Or could you hold open this door while I, you know, get my groceries out? So it also doesn't have to be something that's tangible or monetary. And so I wanted to thank and kind of call out Kimberly for pointing out that service commitments and requests are also something that you can ask for.
I don't have the research right in front of me, but I'll send it to you, Kim, so you can share with the group afterwards if that works out. Yes. There was a fairly recent article that said that assessed the fact that women are asked at work more often and also accept more often what they call non-promotable tasks at work. So the serve on this committee, plan the party, you know, these sort of housekeeping service items that need to get done. The workplace falls apart if somebody isn't doing it. Yep. But that fact that there's a disproportionate number of women saying yes to, I mean, it's not like, and they in the research, they even controlled for, well, maybe women just enjoy that type of work more. No, these were tasks that nobody wanted to do, but the women were the ones who eventually said, okay, fine, nobody will do it, I'll do it. And like, then your time is eaten up doing that and in the non-promotable arena. So yeah, great catch.
It's a big one. I also really loved this point when it comes to making big asks, because it is something that is my personal pet peeve. Like, it drives me crazy, which is when someone's making an ask of me or my time or what have you. They make it more of like a project for me. So like, not only are you asking me to do something for you, you are giving me like a chore or a task to go along with it. And it makes me less likely to do that. And one of the things you brought up was making it easy to fulfill an ask. So I put this little note in here about like, I love yes, no questions. Like, if someone asks me a question and just says, hey, I need to do X, Y, Z. Are you okay with that? And I can just say yes, no. It's so much easier than them asking me, hey, can you help me think of a solution for X? That requires me to stop, like sit down, brainstorm. It's so much more of a disruption.
Yep, absolutely. I love it. My students that ask for recommendation letters, if they will draft it for me and then just say, you know, feel free to edit, add your own flair if you want to, but why you're making an ask of my time to do a favor for you. I'm not the one that wants to study abroad or go to grad school. That's you. And I'm happy to help you with that letter, but make it easy for me.
Make it easy. If you're going to ask somebody for a favor or a colleague to do something to help you in any way, I love this point of make it easy to fulfill. Make it a yes, no question, or even I say like multiple choice. So,
Yes.
it's actually something I've actually learned in my 1 year of marriage now, that it works extremely well in personal relationships as well. Because, I will say to my husband, we have to see your parents sometime this week. Option A, we can see them Tuesday after work. If the week is too busy, option B, Saturday night. They both have pros and cons to them. Which one would you rather? And it's sort of, he has to think about it for a minute, but at least just condensing those choices down is really helpful, it seems.
Yes, I agree. Absolutely. Condense the
And then how
choices,
do you,
make the
when
action
you,
obvious and easy. Yeah.
yes, when you work with these teams that this fact might not be obvious to them, how do you help people restructure their asks?
Yeah. How do we get an ask that back to is if it's not a direct ask, how do we work through that? And I think that is,
Exactly.
yeah. So absolutely. Great question. Working with this idea that my ask requires some action on the part of the other person. So begin with that. What would I see you doing? What would the action be that you would take when you leave? Because those more nebulous requests are just harder to act on. So imagine the action you want to see and state that up front. And then lead into the why it should happen, if you even need to. In some situations, just make the ask. If the person follows up with, well, Kim, why do you need me to do that? Then you've got your answer ready to go. But sometimes just make the ask, right?
Make the ask and make it concise. What do you think? I love this point that Giacomo brings up. You know, what about asks between sort of like leaders and employers, or kind of leaders and subordinates? Do your asks need to change when you're asking something like someone is equal to you versus asking someone that is maybe of an upper level status?
Yeah, that power dynamic does play in for sure. So that's a great question. I think, though, that we get a little tripped up on being, and culture plays into it too, but I don't think we have to perceive ourselves just because we are in a subordinate role on a corporate ladder as being subordinate to. I don't think we have to
Yes.
be as deferential as perhaps we think. And maybe that's part of why we get so caught up on the, oh, I shouldn't ask. That hesitation is because we're assuming that I don't have the right to ask. But at the end of the day, work is a contract. I've agreed to do this for this, and and hopefully I'm finding meaning in that, and joy, and fulfillment, and fun, and playfulness. And it's a contract for me to do this for that. And so honoring that contract sometimes means I just need to go to my supervisor, my manager, and say, this is what I need. Here's why I need it. Let's go. But I think that here's why we need it is as relevant, if not more so, if you are in the position of power. Because now you do have the right to just say, Brenda, go do this. But all of our research shows us that if I don't understand the motivation for doing it, the rationale behind it, I may do it out of a sense of requirement, out of compliance, but you don't have my heart in it. So that why is probably even more important to express when you're making a request of someone that reports up to you.
Well, and I think it's also really important when we think about those dynamics also within yourself. So that point you just made of like really sitting with yourself and being like, well, why am I doing this? Or what's motivating me to do this? I think sometimes that the voice in our own head is sometimes also part of the communication strategy too. I think sometimes we think like communications is outward. Sometimes there's a lot of communication going on in here. You're like talking to yourself. And so I know that happens to me a lot. And so I'm glad that Liz brought up this point of, what happens when you do have that sort of internal communication that maybe you want to ask a question or you want to make an ask, but you're kind of 5 steps ahead going, well, if I ask this question, then somebody's going to think I'm stupid. Or if I ask this question, then my boss is going to come in and micromanage me and then take away the project. How do you quiet maybe that own voice, and then how do you step forward from there?
Yeah, let me start with the example of I might sound stupid kind of thing. I went to a meeting one time. It was my first time on this particular task force. So I'm seated with all of these more tenured faculty. They've been with the school for much longer than I have. They have more experience and wisdom on the topic at hand than I had. Kim, I sat through the entire meeting and I didn't say a word. I left without ever opening my mouth. And it wasn't a huge meeting. There were maybe 7 people at this table.
Yeah.
And one of the seniors in the room caught me in the hallway afterwards, and in a very loving and gracious way gave me the gift of this feedback, which was, why didn't you talk? Why didn't you say something? You just hurt your credibility sitting there. And I said, I just didn't feel like I had anything to offer. You're almost so much wiser than you. He said, Brenda, the reason we had you in here was we needed fresh perspective. We needed your questions to mix this up. That's why we brought you in. I blew it, and it was one of those, okay, I get it. And so that pushed me then to sit at every table and say, I don't have anything to add in terms of substance, but I have great questions that, unless I just have not been paying any attention, these are good questions. Ask them. So I think that's one of the ways to address the, oh, shoot, I might look stupid. No, you might look like you have fresh perspective. You might look like you are curious and a learner and you have a growth mindset. We want all of that at our tables. So bring on those questions. As for micromanaging, that is a really interesting question. I'm sure she's asking for a friend. But this idea that maybe our questions in and of themselves, first, I think we need to assume a lot of positive intent. Is my boss micromanaging me or trying to resource me with lots of ways to be successful? And if I start with that as the mindset, then I can say, here's my request. And I think some of the ways you could help me be successful are, and then that gives you an opportunity to set some parameters. I think it would be helpful if we did check-ins once a week on this, i.e., I don't want to check in every 30 minutes with you. So maybe that could help some of the setting some parameters, and you just build those right into the request, knowing some of that context that Liz had.
Well, and I think that's so point, setting those parameters, setting those boundaries. You don't want emails every hour, certainly, or every day or every afternoon being like, well, where is this status report? What's happening? You definitely don't want someone, breathing down your neck or really kind of stunting your ability to do the work, which is why you're there, which is what your expertise is. And so I feel like that fits in really well to this second point that you had brought up with us, which is around, drafting concise emails and really being powerful with your boundaries, being powerful with your words. And I loved this question that you challenged all of us to make, which is, what action do I need them to take? And I would love for you to just expand on that a little bit.
Yes. So one of my pet peeves is reading an email where there are 3 paragraphs of blah, blah, blah. I did this. The committee did this. This was the outcome. And then I've about given up reading before I realized that buried down there in the 4th paragraph is actually a request of my time and an action that I'm supposed to take. So I am such an advocate for move that action item. Not only get clear in your mind, what action do I need to take, but move that sentence way up to either sentence 1 or sentence 2 of the email. I use an acronym MADE, M-A-D-E, with message being one sentence of giving us some background information. Background's not even the right word, because that opens up the floodgates for way too much information. Just a simple statement of what this is about. You can sometimes even skip that and just start with the action request. Only lead without action if you need some kind of context, if the action would make no sense without something else. But when Kim reached out to me to be here today, she didn't have, and you did great, Kim. But I mean, so you just start with would you like to go live with me on March 1? Boom, let's go. And then there's some message about, here's kind of what I cover in live. This is what they are like. But there are so many people that would reach out, Kim, and it would be, hi, I do these LinkedIn lives and this is my focus. And buried in the fourth paragraph would be the request, are you available? Or worse yet, are you available, but not a date, not a topic, just kind of, again, nebulous request back to what we'd already talked about make the action easy. Here's the link if you're good to go. Schedule yourself here. Those things that make life easier for the person you're making the request of. But yes, absolutely. Drafting concise emails, get the message first. If you need it, one sentence. The action should be sentence number 2. What action are you asking of us? Then any details that we need or any editing that you need to do. That's the MADE part of it. Yeah.
Well, and I love that because I feel like, listen, let's be honest. Everybody these days has the attention span of like a squirrel. They're reading and then they're like, squirrel, squirrel. Like they read 3 sentences and then they're off. Or I know for me, I'm definitely guilty of this. I try not to do it, but I do sometimes check emails on my phone, which means like I'm kind of on the go. So I just want to read something really quick. And again, being able to respond that yes, no, or do the latter, not the former. And so I think it's important when we think about that MADE, really also that last E, editing for kind of tone and accuracy. I am amazed all the time, Brenda, that people don't read their emails once they finish writing them. It's like they write it and then it's just like, boom, we're sending it. And I'm like, hold on, slow your roll, stop, reread everything you just wrote and ask yourself, like, does this even make sense?
Right.
Did I write this in a way that somebody else reading it is going to understand? Because I think that is a key step in the equation.
Right. Well, and talk about opportunity for miscommunication then, because either I've said something I did not intend to say or in a tone I did not intend to communicate, or worse, the person receiving it doesn't want to start the back and forth 20 email thread chain. And so they are conscientiously trying to guess at what I mean. They're going to read in some assumptions because I wasn't clear. And so they go with, I think this is what she's asking, or I think this is what she means. And they're rolling with that. And here, in the meantime, I was clear over on a whole different avenue. And whoop, that's where crazy things start to happen.
That is when the miscommunication, you're right, is totally rampant. And you can think one thing when somebody else was trying to convey something totally different. Yeah. And I'm curious, in a case where somebody's communicating and it's very clear cut. So, for anybody who works in a restaurant or in a, service-based industry, there are going to be people that are unhappy with your services or products, and they might get on Yelp or TripAdvisor, or maybe they write into your contact us link on your website, and they are none too pleased. And there's no miscommunication about that. They are unhappy with a capital U. How do we deal with communicating to someone that we know is just, they are not happy? They have a big issue with our product or our service.
We start with, and I think this, are we going to talk about criticism and accepting criticism? Because I think this is part of accepting criticism, right? Is we need to start with gratitude. And that is so hard when someone has blasted us, especially in a sort of public forum. But that idea that it really is a gift when someone gives us feedback, even if we disagree with the feedback, even if we perceive of it differently, it still helps us see how others are experiencing us, our product, our service. And that is a gift. In fact, as people climb their corporate ladders, as you move up in rank or space in your organizations, you get less and less real feedback. There are fewer and fewer people who positionally feel empowered to give you honest feedback. So anytime you get it at whatever level, role, position that you're in, just be so deeply grateful that someone was willing to give it to you. I don't know about you. It's hard for me to give people constructive feedback. And so I have to assume that if someone's coming to give me constructive feedback, it might have been hard for them as well. Maybe more collegial. Now, this customer situation, I don't know that it was hard for them to give that feedback. They may have been very, and then that empathy piece is, things didn't go the way they wanted. They had some vision in their head of what was going to happen, and it didn't materialize. And they've got all this angst and anger about it now. And while I'm not sure I can resolve all of that, I can at least understand it. So the first words out of our mouth or out of our fingers, if we're responding in writing, thank you so much for reaching out to help us understand that this was an issue. And then the empathy piece. That I'm so sorry that happened. That must have been really frustrating. Or we are so sorry that, mom's birthday party didn't work out the way you'd hoped because we were short-staffed that day. Just some honest empathy. Put yourself in their shoes. If you had taken mom out for her 70th birthday party and it took an hour to get everybody served because the restaurant was short-staffed, there's a frustration to that. And no, it doesn't mean that the restaurant should have magically known that people were going to be out sick that day or had some backup plan, but at least empathize with that, I think are two of the truly great ways to start that conversation.
And when you're using that sort of empathy or gratitude, do you have like a template or a ratio where you're like, sentence number 1, thank you for writing in. Sentence number 2 is using empathy, because I think a template would be helpful, because I really appreciate Lavender's point that he wrote in the chat, which is, sometimes we hate, I'm speaking for myself here, you hate confronting people. So sometimes you're overly, empathetic, or you have so much gratitude that then it's almost like you're sugarcoating the problem almost. You're overly saying like, oh, I'm just so sorry. Because you don't really want to deliver the feedback, because that's kind of the hard part, but the feedback is important. So how do we do that?
Oh my gosh, so much so. I think there's a couple of things that come to mind there. One, Kim Scott's work on radical candor is so relevant to your question, Lavender, where she talks about the fact that we have to balance that empathy with directness, that we don't want it to be all empathy, nor do we want it to be all directness. And Ed Batista is a coach and consultant who talks about that empathy and accountability mix really well too. He says, if it's all empathy, it's like it's daycare, but if it's all directness, it's boot camp, and we're striving for not even a happy medium. We're striving for high levels of both. High levels of empathy and high levels of accountability. And I think that's a really important nuance to this conversation. So I'm so grateful for Lavender's comment on this, because we're not going to sacrifice accountability to be empathetic, nor do we need to sacrifice empathy to be accountable. That's the false dilemma. We don't have to choose between the two. We can be both and. And I think that's one of the things I hope everybody leaves with, is that I can give you that direct feedback. I can have high expectations. I can have boundaries and say, this is not okay. We're not going to do it this way ever again. And still understand why you did what you did, understand why you feel what you did, and still have that clear-cut accountability. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. And I think it's also going back to kind of what you said before. It's also just practice, right? It's also just practice, and maybe practicing more in kind of how you were saying, for those like low stakes practices. So maybe giving criticism on something that's very small, although you don't want to sound nitpicky, but at least somewhat exercising that, instead of just everything's happy until you have one big criticism bomb to like drop on someone.
Right. Or even, maybe it's not even small, but it's more technical. People can take feedback about, oh, hey, there were 3 typos in the deck, in the visual deck that we took to the client. That is an easier kind of comment, then you tend to dominate the conversation in meetings. Oh, that feels so much more personal. But you know what?
Yeah.
We have to talk about that sometimes. Now, we can couch it in the reason this matters is, psychological safety is built on a number of factors, one of which is equalized talk time, and our team isn't having equalized talk time. I know part of that means I need to talk more, but I think I'm going to be better able to do that if you, my colleague, talk less. That conversation is real, but it does have a more personal feel to it. So since we drifted into giving feedback, check out the SBI format for giving feedback. I think it's just brilliant. Situation, behavior, impact. And so it's a template, it's a turnkey. So I think, okay, and I voice it that way. Here's the situation. Here's what your behavior was in it. Here's the impact. So we were in that meeting with the client that I had done most of the research for. You talked most of the time. There's the behavior. The impact is the client didn't get to hear a lot of the research and analysis that we've done. Situation, behavior, impact, SBI. But I also think SBI can be helpful when we need to ask for feedback or someone's giving us feedback and it's a little, we're not quite sure what to do with it. So let's say Kim says, Brenda, I'm really glad you came on with me as a guest yesterday, but I'm not really sure we're a good match for future meetings. And I'd be like, oh, I don't know what to do with that because I don't know what the problem is. So I could say, oh, okay, well, can you tell me a little bit more about what the behavior was I brought to your show that didn't work? And what was the impact of that? So I'm actually directing her to give me feedback that I can actually use.
Yep. Which I think using that SBI template is amazingly helpful for that.
Oh, yeah.
In addition to the template, I'm curious about this point that you brought up, which is your third thought. What is your third thought?
So third thought for me is that when someone criticizes me, and my first reaction is usually defend. Tell them why that's not right. Right? That's that sort of knee-jerk defensive reaction. Okay, probably not my best go-to. The very next thing out of my mouth is going to be something maybe not quite so defensive, but maybe a little snarky or a little sarcastic because I'm just still not worked through it. By the time I say, take one more breath, what's my third thought on this? By then, I've taken 3 breaths, I've taken 3 beats, I've slowed my roll, to use your expression, and it's awesome because then I finally get to oh yeah, I'm supposed to be expressing gratitude. I'm supposed to be saying things that show my empathy, that I can understand it from their perspective. I think it's that third thought where our rational brain finally clicks in and reminds us that we know what to do. I just needed a beat to get there.
I love that because you're right. I think that I love your example of being stuck in traffic too, because I think we've all had that happen, and maybe perhaps we've gone with our first and second choice on that.
And our first and second choice are usually not our best.
No, they are usually not our best at all. And then last but not least, how can we start using this phrase, which I think is so helpful that you pointed out, which is yes and? Can you give us some examples that people who are joining us today or listening on the podcast can use in their everyday work life around yes and?
Absolutely. So yes and actually comes from the discipline of improv, where in improvisational theater or improv comedy, you're trying to make the conversation move on. You're trying to make your partner or your fellow players in the theater look good. That's kind of the goal of improv. And so they work with this principle of yes and. So I took improv classes and learned it, and then realized it is so applicable to all of life, so that when you give me this feedback and I thanked you for it, I've demonstrated empathy, and I have something to add to it. Like there is that opportunity for me to share my perspective. And so I can do that with, so yes, thank you for that feedback, Kim. And I can understand how you might have been frustrated by X. And here's why that happened. So yes, and. So yes, this is your reality. And I think we can consider this factor too. Yes, and. So I'm not negating your experience in any way. I'm expanding on it and carrying the conversation forward even more.
I love this idea of expansion and continuing the conversation. I'm curious, Brenda, as we start to wrap up here, where do you feel like you go to for that own version of expansion in your life? Are there creators or brands or newsletters or podcasts that you follow that you're just like, you know what? Every time XYZ hits my inbox or hits my Audible, or I see that person or that brand's posts online, they just kind of light me up and help me expand my own knowledge and learning base.
My what expands me? Okay, my expander is a literal and the metaphorical expander. It is a woman who does online yoga named Adrienne. So it's yoga with Adrienne. Find what feels good. She and her dog Benji do at-home yoga. And it literally is an expander of my physical being, but also very much an expander of my brain and of my heart. Yeah. Great expander.
I love it. Fun fact, she's based here in Austin.
Yeah. Oh, yes, that's right.
For the day. I know. I haven't seen her.
You could go to a live Adrienne class. I'm so jealous. Do it.
I'm always on the hunt. Okay, Brenda, just to kind of wrap us up here, our community loves homework. We love homework. We love being able to keep following up, keep learning. So I'm curious if you could give all of us a homework assignment this week. It could be to read something. It could be to listen to something. It could be to pick up a certain book that you think is really valuable. What would be a homework assignment that you would give us that we can carry with us throughout the rest of the week?
I would ask you to go to your sent email file and audit the last 20 emails you sent. Did you use one sentence of message? Is your action that you're asking of the other person your second line or even your first line? Just do that email audit. I think it would be great homework for you to sort of self-check, little reality check on how closely, how concisely, how action-oriented your emails are. And a great way to also sort of touch base with, am I using email appropriately? Am I writing these long, convoluted emails because it's a large, complex topic? I should have called a meeting. I should have picked up the phone. If email is meant for quick action requests, quick FYIs, if you're using it for more than that, go do your email audit and figure that out.
I love this idea of an email audit. Okay, where can people find you? Where do you spend the most time? Where can they keep learning from you?
LinkedIn, for sure. Yes, I'm on LinkedIn all the time to check in and see what people are up to. So follow me on LinkedIn. Right now, I have a course, the Communication Foundations course is free until March 15th, whether you're a LinkedIn subscriber or not. It's part of their most in-demand campaign skills. So check out the course to learn so many more tips on great communication. Meet my business partner, Tatiana Kolavu, who has co-authored that course with me. And yeah, check us out on LinkedIn.
Oh, I love it, Brenda. This has been so amazing and so helpful, everybody. Just like you heard, if you have questions that we didn't get to, or you think, oh, Brenda, there was one more thing, follow her on LinkedIn. She's pumping out a lot of great information on these subject areas. So Brenda, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It was so good to meet your listeners and to get to chat all things calm. I love it.
Me too. I want to thank everybody for joining us on this kind of inaugural joint mini workshop. Let us know what you think about it. Write us messages on LinkedIn or email or Instagram, whatever your choice of communication is. We're here and we will take it for you. We do not have a Coffee with Kim section next Wednesday, but that's okay. We're going to be picking up right where we left off. You can always go to getcoffeewithkim.com and see the full schedule. So thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Thank you, Brenda, for your time and wisdom. And I hope everybody has a great rest of the week. Cheers.
Cheers.